Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another session of the ACA Global Market Encounter with Jim Fitzpatrick. Kindly be reminded that this session is being held in English with a simultaneous French interpretation. To access this service, kindly click on the globe icon on your screen, select a preferred language, and mute the original sound. On behalf of the African Cashew Alliance, I would like to appreciate our sponsors and partners who have made it possible for us to bring this session to you. And without wasting much time, I would like to invite Jim to take over. Jim, good morning again.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. You're very welcome. Thanks for joining us. Today, we're going to talk about new crops, as you would at this time of year, a little bit about the old stocks said to be in the market, and generally how we're looking for the start of the season. So we'll start slightly different format this time. We'll start with a short market update from myself, and then we'll join our guests. We have a really good group of guests today, more than usual. So you can look forward to some contributions from different countries, different people, and I hope you're going to find that really interesting. Then we will have a look at some questions and some answers, and we'll have a general discussion about markets and about the outlook for the coming months. So let's have a look at who's joining us today. We're very fortunate. We have from Vietnam, Jasvinder Singh Sethi, the General Manager of Namagro, who has been with us before, back in November, I think. And he gave us some really interesting information at that time, and we had a good conversation. So we're really happy to have him back today. From Cambodia, we'll be joined by Dara An, the founder of Ample Agro Products, the president of the Cambodian Cashew Association, and by now a veteran in the cashew business. And we're very welcome to him too. We're also joined by Tukaram Prabhu, who needs little introduction on this forum. Tukaram is from MMP Cashew in Karnataka in India, and he has been a participant in the cashew business for, I think it's 40 years now that MMP is in business, or just about. And he's also known as an analyst and a market commentator. Then from African countries, we will be joined by Ojo Ajanaku, the president of the National Cashew Association of Nigeria. First time, I think, with us, and very welcome too. It'll be really interesting to see the perspective from Nigeria, a growing cashew country, growing in processing, growing in production, and also growing in the quality of the nuts produced. Welcome to Ojo. From Benin, another first-timer with this particular event. From Benin, Josiane Njigayabadi, sourcing director, which is very appropriate if you think about the topic of crops today. From Afokan Tan, a processor in Benin, a company I visited myself last August, doing a really good job, really good quality, and with a social impact and ethical agenda too. We will also be joined from Ghana, and I'm going here from east to west, as you may have noted, by Forster Boateng, the Deputy Director of the Tree Cups Development Authority of Ghana. The TCDA is now working on developing a regulatory and policy framework for the development of the cashew sector in Ghana. As you probably know, Ghanaian cashews are of high quality, and production has been growing in recent years. And finally, from the largest cashew growing country in the world, Cote d'Ivoire, Mamadou Doumbia, the Director of Commercialization of the CCA. CCA is the Conseil de Cotton et d'Anacarde, and CCA is the regulatory body for cashews in Cote d'Ivoire. So as you can see over these speakers, we actually cover about 84% of world cashew production. And we're looking forward to hearing from them. But before we do, I'm going to talk to you a little bit with some scene setters, if you like, some general comments from my perspective, and some general comments and talking points, which we can pursue perhaps a little bit later on with some questions and some chat. So first of all, let's have a look at the overall production as I see it for 2023. As you can see on the screen, the blue bars are total world production estimate. So for 2023, I think we're going to have a slightly better crop than, certainly better than last year and slightly better than 2021. So you can see that production continues to rise, but that perhaps the speed of that rise is slowing down. Let's have a look at some of the individual countries. I won't go into these too much because our speakers will tell us more. You can see that we're looking at Cambodia, again, a good crop, a bit better than last year, we think, we hope. Looking at India, pretty much along the trend that it's been on for some time. Of course, it's early days in India. The Indian crop comes in a little bit later these days than it used to do. And going on, then you can see the various crops, the total southern hemisphere. I suppose we should comment on that before we go on. Southern hemisphere crop, as you know, was a little bit disappointing in the last year, particularly Tanzania and Brazil. We haven't seen any real increase in production, and certainly in Tanzania, the predicted increase unfortunately didn't materialize. But again, in Mozambique, good to average crop. But Southern Hemisphere, generally speaking, as you can see from the light blue bars right across, is relatively static in terms of its trend going forward. Moving on, we look at the crop in Cote d'Ivoire. Mamadou will tell us some more about this, but again, a good crop is predicted, and Cote d'Ivoire will maintain its position as the leading producer of cashews in the world. And overall, then look at West Africa. Now, just draw your attention to the three trend lines on the screen. So you can see overall West Africa, we're seeing a flattening curve, which means that the pace of growth in production is slowing somewhat. If we look at the situation elsewhere, we see a general increase. Just excuse me for one moment. There seems to be a problem with the interpretation channels. The French is coming on the English channel. Okay, I'll continue. If generally looking at production, what we're seeing is that the growth in production in recent years has been driven by growth in Cambodia, but that elsewhere we're seeing a flattening curve. In other words, production is still growing, but perhaps not growing as quickly as it has been heretofore. Of course, we have to see and recognize the big jump we saw in production around 2019, 2020, which is when Cambodia really started to come on stream. So let's have a look at some of the talking points over the last 2 weeks since we were with you last. We'll start in Cote d'Ivoire, where the minimum price was set at CFA 315, a slight increase on last year, bringing us to about $523 at the farm gate. And of course, this is for the standard quality. But in US dollars, if we adjust that for the exchange rate, we're looking at pretty much the same price as last year. So no great change there. Probably a price that can work for farmers and should work for processors. And I'll talk to you a little bit about that in a minute. If we look in Vietnam, there has been some rain. This was widely publicized on some of the different forums. But I think we just need to temper that by recognizing that although Vietnam is by far the largest processor of cashews in the world, Vietnamese production is only about 3% of world production, which means that although it won't be any consolation to Vietnamese farmers, but if there were to be a smaller crop in Vietnam, it probably wouldn't affect the overall supply situation worldwide. We're also seeing, and it's been talked about a lot in the past 2 weeks, more and more development of roasting and consumer packs for export, perhaps initially to the Chinese market, but certainly with target markets in Europe, the United States. And we know already that roasted cashews from Vietnam are going to the US, to Europe, and indeed to Australia. Interesting points arose during the PTNPA, that's a trade association in the United States where the nut roasters and processors meet once a year in January. And one of the key talking points there was that US retailers are keeping nut prices unchanged or pretty high, which impacts demand, and probably at retail level, and perhaps this could also be said in Europe, that retail prices are probably higher than they would need to be given the current price of the raw material. So interestingly, if you look at retail prices of cashew kernels, we see them rising at a time when the price of the raw material, the kernels, is in or around 10, perhaps 12-year lows over the past 12 months. That hasn't been reflected in retail prices, and that would, of course, be one of the reasons why demand has been a little bit sluggish in Europe and very sluggish in the second half of the year in the United States. It does beg the question that maybe promotions will return in 2023. Promotions at retail level are a big driver of demand in the United States and can be a catalyst for increased activity in the market, increased imports, increased purchasing. So we need to keep an eye out for that. But I don't see that happening in the immediate future. That's probably something for later in the year. Also for later in the year, and something which is definitely going to have an impact on the sentiment of the market, but that is likely to flow in terms of actual shipments a little bit more slowly, is the easing of inflation. With prices falling, energy prices falling, for our industry, important is that vegetable oil prices have been falling. I looked, for example, at some of the projections for some European countries, our own country at home in particular, and the projections are inflation 2022 at 8%, 4% in 2023, falling to 2% in 2024. Now, that means, I suspect, a return of a lot of confidence to the market. Consumers will be more active. And I don't think that the underlying positive trend in demand in Western countries has changed. And if we look at the situation in India, we saw Indian demand very much interrupted by the pandemic for 2 years, but turning and really returning last year with huge strength. So that can possibly be repeated in Western markets. But this is not something that's going to happen today or tomorrow or next week or next month. This is something that will kick in over the second half of 2023 and into 2024. Meantime, looking at the market, kernels prices are stable. African kernels are still making premium prices over kernels from Vietnam. The raw cashew nuts have started the season a little bit strong in price, I think. It doesn't match with kernels, and we do need to ask the question, as we did 2 weeks ago, how long can this situation persist? And I'll have a quick look at that shortly. Meantime, in the organic segment, which is becoming more and more important, one of the segments that was worst hit by the slowdown in demand last year. But now we see relative limited volumes, but again, African organic WW320s trading at a very high premium, around about 30%. The normal premium you'd expect would be somewhere in the region of 25%. So that could be an indicator of returning demand. It's certainly an indicator of strong interest in African cashew kernels at this time and going forward over the rest of the year. Let's talk about some numbers. we'll have a look at US imports. So the US last year, we have the final figures now, and you can see how US demand suffered last year. So here is the dark, heavy black line is US imports month by month during 2022. And as you can see, having started on quite a positive trend, it tailed away poorly over the year and ended up back at the same level as 2019, well below 2020, well below 2021. Of course, this is not by any means a disastrous performance. 2019 was a terrific year, but it was a little bit surprising for many of us that US demand suffered so much in the second half of last year. It finished the year about 19% down on the previous year. And I think what really puts it into perspective is if we look at Vietnamese exports, the reduced shipments to the US accounted for more than half of the fall in exports from Vietnam, which just indicates A, how important the US market is, and B, what a large share of it Vietnam has, with 89% still maintained last year. So that doesn't look good, but what does look a little bit better is how African cashew kernels fared in the US market during last year. You can see in the pie chart, the yellow segment is African cashew kernels, significant share, which is now grown to 7.56% to be exact last year. That's a 33% increase in market share versus the previous year. And obviously this is very, very positive. If we look at particularly at Cote d'Ivoire, we see that the 5-year compound annual growth rate, the rate of increase of shipments from Cote d'Ivoire to the United States, is now at 29%, and Nigeria is at 26%. This is really fast growth. If we take all African countries, the rate of growth is about 5.3%. So we are seeing significant growth, but it is, for now at least, concentrated on shipments from Cote d'Ivoire and from Nigeria. So that's very positive. And if you recall, we spoke about the share of the European market recently, and that too grew significantly last year. So what we're seeing is the shipments of African kernels to Western countries increasing quickly, even in times of low growth or no growth in imports, which again is very encouraging. Let's have a look at some of the other numbers. Let's have a look at Vietnam's exports to China. And as you can see, last year, exports to China were down a little on 2021. Now, there are a couple of factors here that we probably need to take into account. The figures will be slightly distorted by changes in the calendar. And if we look at January of this year in particular, that's illustrated. So looking at January, you can see that the blue is the import of raw cashew nuts in tons, and the orange is the export, of cashew kernels. So in January 2023, you can see that the overall export was down back actually to levels last seen in 2020. And 2020 wasn't a good year because in the early part of the year, if you recall, the Chinese market was closed due to the beginning at that time of the pandemic. So let's have a quick look then at the overall change. So we saw quite respectable imports matching previous years into Vietnam in January, but we saw reduced exports. So I've recalculated my 13 months. So this is all of 2022. And what we saw in January, just to put it very simply, is that the situation in terms of the stock got slightly slightly worse, let's say, that the inventories at the end of January would have been slightly less than the inventories on the 15th of January when we last did the figures. But this is not, it's not a major factor, and it doesn't take into account stocks that are in transit. I'm sure Jasvinder will tell us more about the situation in Vietnam shortly. So let's have a look at the RCN pricing. We mentioned that the year has started a little bit high. So you can see I've plotted here Cote d'Ivoire, Benin, Ghana, and Nigeria. These are cost and freight prices. India, Vietnam, so it's a kind of an average between the two. Sometimes the prices are higher for one destination than the other for various reasons. And you can see just the beginning of the season up to the middle of February, you can see where prices are now. The key thing at this time of year is let's have a look how that compares with the previous year. So first of all, we're looking here at the yellow is Ghana and the blue Cote d'Ivoire, and we look at Cote d'Ivoire and we see that prices are starting roughly where they started last year. But let's not forget that last year they dipped down into February before recovering again as the year went on. And of course, what I do here is a standard quality. So this is not the cheapest parcels. This is a standard quality. So this would be for £48 in the case of Cote d'Ivoire. And that is a pattern, starting high with offered prices, as you can see back in 2021, then dropping down and recovering. So this is really about the market finding its level, finding what buyers and sellers want to do. We see that start high, drop down, and then recover to a more workable level in 21. We see a similar situation last year. If we look at prices from Ghana, we see a slightly different picture. Prices from Ghana have started lower than they did last year. And that's interesting because last year we saw prices start, you can see the yellow line, and it was quite volatile during the season, but perhaps there were issues of quality at certain times during last year. And you can see that that was reflected later in the year when some lower quality parcels came to the market and we saw a little bit of volatility in the RCN price. So Ghana is starting lower than it did last year. But rather than saying that this year's price is too low, I think I'm more tempted to say that last year's price was perhaps too high at the start of the year. Certainly it made no calculations. Looking at Nigeria, and you're looking at prices starting in or around where they started last year. And perhaps you might see some volatility later on, but let's not forget that you also have differences of quality now in Nigeria, different quality parcels. So looking at this situation overall, I think that we need to, generally speaking, I think we can say that prices are steady. Doesn't make a great calculation for processors at the moment. There is a lot of talk about stocks. But if you take Cote d'Ivoire, for example, and calculate the CCI's estimate of last year's crop, what was bought by processors and what was exported officially, you would end up with stocks of only about 85,000 tons. Sounds like a lot, but it's not. 85,000 tons is about 8% of the crop. And that's very little in terms of an overall picture of a carryout. 8% of a crop is very little. Now, there are certainly some stocks lying in other countries too, but I don't think that there is enough to be thinking that that will weigh heavily on the market this year. We'll have a look at the situation on cashew kernels and particularly focusing on this mismatch that we've talked about many times. So as usual, I've done a quick analysis of the cost of 320s processed in Vietnam from Vietnamese RCN or from Cambodian RCN, from imported RCN from Cote d'Ivoire, and then a look at Indian processing cost based on domestic, based on Ghanaian, and then a quick analysis from the most efficient factories in Cote d'Ivoire and just see what their costs would be. So when we look at that, we see that the situation for Vietnam for the local and the imported RCN is just on the market. This is really not workable. This is cost matching market price. Very difficult to make a profit margin in those circumstances. In India, bearing in mind, of course, that the Indian 320 market, the domestic market, is much higher than the international market, which is the blue dotted line. And looking at that, you can see that domestic processors in India, based on a notional value for the new crop or CN or for imported, I've taken Ghanaian because Ghanaian is available in the market for new crop shipments. But looking at this, again, there is a calculation there, but it's not particularly attractive calculation. And finally, if we look at the most efficient Ivorian factories based on their outturn and based on their cost of processing, they are still looking that they should be able to make a margin. So if we just translate that into a general gross margin calculation, what we see is that still based on calculations, and now of course this will differ from one factory to another, and it will differ right across the sector, but we, in order to analyze, we try to make some generalizations, and I think these generalizations are quite reasonable. What we continue to see is low margins or no margins for Vietnamese processors. Now that can mean, of course, that either the cost of the raw cashew nuts is too high or the sales price of kernels is too low. Usually when this happens, it's a mix of the two. But certainly at this moment in time, it's going to be difficult for Vietnamese processors to make the kind of margins that they need to make to build their industry. In India, it's better, but I wouldn't say it's particularly attractive either. And in Cote d'Ivoire, it looks like a really efficient processor. Now, it's difficult to be a really efficient processor in the early stages of the industry in Cote d'Ivoire, but a really efficient processor should be able to start to hit the kind of margins that are needed to offer sustainable profitability. So looking at the situation as it stands, we're looking at really over the last 2 weeks, a continuation of the expected trends, maybe some chink of light in demand and in the trends and perhaps in the sentiment of the market, demand-wise, but no real suggestion that that's going to turn into immediate big volume orders across the board anytime soon. So continued difficult times ahead. So let's have a word now with our very welcome guests, and I'd like to start with Jasvinder, and let's see if is Jasvinder with us, Blessing?
No, he's not joined yet. Maybe he's having internet issues, but I'm trying to reach him.
Okay. What about Dara?
So we have Dumbia Mamadou online, we have Foster Boateng online, we have Josiane also online, as well as Mr. Ojoa Janako. Perhaps we could begin with those whilst I contact the others.
Okay, very good, Blessing. Thank you. So let's then go to, let's put our speakers' names up onto the screen first of all. So why don't we start with Nigeria. Ojo Ajanaku, the president of the National Cashew Association of Nigeria. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Mr. Jim.
How are you keeping?
I'm doing great. Nice hearing your voice again after our last meeting in Ivory Coast.
Yeah, it's great to have you with us. Thanks very much indeed for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Tell us about the situation in Nigeria for the upcoming season. How do you see it developing?
Thank you for the privilege. Yeah, Nigeria cashew is looking good. The season is looking bright. Looking at the weather today, it's favorable, and the season starts earlier than usual. We normally do our flag off every February, but this year we look at the fruiting of the fruit, and we decide to do flag off this January around 24th. And currently, what we have on ground, they are very good crops. In the past, Nigeria cashew used to be rated as one of those cashew that is of low quality, but it's taking a very great new dimension now. The qualities have improved. For this season, what we are getting now as the KOR, we are getting as high as 52, 53 KOR in some areas. I think the reason majorly is because of when we discover that there is some part of the country that is Oyo State, we are having a better production, and attention was in that area around 2019 and 2018, 2019. Farmers decide to start to plant that of crops that are coming out of that area, and it's gradually circulating all over the country. The uniformity of the quality is becoming almost one quality across the country now. Though there are still some areas where their crops are, the quality are still low, but we are trying to see how those ones are improved. But looking at the weather, looking at the season as it is today, we're having a very good season. And we think it's good. We're having a very good season. That is what I can say about the quality for now.
Well, that's good news. And you're expecting then a better crop than last year, a larger crop again?
Sure. Yes, we expect the growth in production has been increasing gradually. Let's say within the 10-11% increase in production. And also, if you allow me to talk about the processing also is very much increasing here in Nigeria. A lot of investors are going into processing in Nigeria and packaging in Nigeria. So we looked at it that the sector is growing, is becoming an emerging economic sector in Nigeria, because attention is being focused, is being on it now. And we think that something good will come out of it this season, better than that of last year. Last year, we have some crops that were delayed in shipping, but as at November, December, I think all the crops that were not bought were shipped within that period.
Okay, that's very positive news. I did notice, if you saw on the slides, that the trade in kernels from Nigeria has been growing rapidly into
Yes.
Western markets, and that's really positive. Thank you very much for now, but stay with us. We're going to come back to you.
Thank you.
I see Tukaram Prabhu has joined us, but let's come and talk about there he is. Tukaram is with us. So let's revert back and have a word with him on the situation in India. Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Fine, Jim. Thank you. How are you?
Yeah, very well. Nice to see you online with us, and thanks for joining again.
Thank you. Thank you.
We saw a very interesting year in India last year. How do you see things developing this year?
No, see, when we talk of India, the imports have been record numbers last year. I think there has been an increase of almost 25 to 30% in import numbers. And as you are aware, We started the season, when I say season, the financial year starts in April with a minimal stock. And with the import numbers, we were expecting a lot of carryover stocks for this season. But that doesn't actually seem to be happening, which means the processing in India has gone up. The processing capacity is increasing. And after a long time, we are seeing an equalization of domestic and export realizations, which means the prices at which we are selling in domestic and in export is almost the difference is reducing a lot. And in terms of import situation, we started the previous season at the same levels as you mentioned, say Ivory Coast at 1250 or 1270 levels. But back then, our currency was at 75 rupees, which is today at 83 rupees. So there is a difference in currency of 10%, which is hitting us very hard. And as far as the local crop is concerned, the weather conditions have been excellent. We expect a good crop this year, unlike last year. But there is a slight delay, of course.
Mhm. You do expect demand to continue, I mean, demand at consumer level in India continue to grow this year?
See, compared to the previous years, our processing has gone up and the consumption also has gone up. But we may not be able to see the same rate of growth in the years to come.
Well, we did see remarkable growth last year. I think it would be impossible
Yeah.
that would be matched again.
Yes, very true.
So the currency factor is, of course, something that's often forgotten, and that has a huge impact on your overall cost base. So you've essentially added about 10% on. And I want to remind our participants that most of the cashews that are processed in India are consumed in India. So a weaker currency is a significant factor. It does impact prices at the wholesale and at the retail level. I'm really interested in what you're saying, Tukram, regarding the export prices moving up to balance or come close or move up toward the level of domestic prices. Is that based on quality? Is it based on target markets? What's brought the increase in the export prices about?
No. See, actually, the export prices per se may not be increasing, but because of the currency, our realizations on export are more.
Ah, yes, okay.
So it is only the currency impact that we are seeing.
Okay, so we're looking at, well, Indian kernels generally make a premium over Vietnamese kernels, but not to match domestic prices. So now you have a situation where you generally have high domestic kernels prices compared to the international market. You have export prices somewhere between, I would always have guessed, between, let's say, the Vietnamese typical price and the Indian domestic price. But the processor has this benefit this year of additional realization due to the depreciation of the rupee against the US dollar. So that is the flip side of the cost factor on the imported RCN. But we should remind everyone that these days, exports from India in terms of a percentage of the overall processing are quite small. So domestic market factors are much more important in determining demand for imported RCN, for example, than export markets or export market volume. Tukram, coming back to the production aspects, we've seen relatively slow growth in production in India in recent years, probably over the last decade, in fact. Is there likely to be any change in that? I read a lot about production initiatives in India. I haven't seen it in the statistics. What's your view on that?
No, see, the traditional areas which were growing cashews, yes, we are seeing a slowdown, but there are plenty new areas which are coming up. So, and these areas are definitely going to grow moving forward.
So we could see the rate of increase start to move up in the next few years as those newer areas come online.
Yes, we will.
Okay. Thank you very much, Tukram. That's a really terrific snapshot of what's likely to happen
Thank
in
you.
India over the coming 12 months. Stay with us, and
Yes.
we'll come back to you. There's bound to be some comments and questions. So moving back from India, further east, moving to Vietnam, and I see Jasvinder has joined us now. Jasvinder, you're very welcome. How do you see the situation in Vietnam evolving in the coming months?
Yeah, hi Jim, and hello to everyone. We are just at the start of the beginning of the crop from Cambodia. Actually, we are seeing certain flows of Cambodian crop coming into Vietnam. It's wet material and it is slowly getting dried. Vietnam crop, I think we had news that the first flush was not good and we are waiting for the second flush. But I don't believe that is true. We have not seen the first flush. Maybe in a couple of weeks from now, we will have Vietnamese crop also coming in. And as far as the weather is concerned, the weather was conducive this year. So we can expect a decent crop from Vietnam also. Now, the numbers could be anybody's guess. 350, 300,000. Cambodia could be, 600, 700. Nobody knows exactly. But what the general rate comes to, discuss is that we may see anywhere between 500 to 600,000 tons coming from Cambodia also. While until last 2 weeks, most processors in Vietnam had shut shop for the holidays, and now they've started coming back after the Chinese New Year, and some action has started. They started booking some raw cashew nut from Africa, which would land somewhere in May or June over here. They booked some Ghana and Ivory Coast. This is because they know that their crop may not be enough to carry them through after June. But the parity in terms of kernels and raw cashew nut is still not healthy for processors. Today, the lowest price for W320 that has got traded in the market is under $2.5 per pound. This is not from a BRC top packer, but it could be a simple HACCP packer, and a BRC top packer could be offering somewhere around $2.6 to $2.65 per pound. Now, at these prices, there is barely any parity to import from African origins, and that is why the large players in Vietnam are still waiting to see that whether the market starts giving higher prices. Now, in 2022, if we remember, what happened is that Vietnam exported anywhere between 510 to 550,000 tons, and the year before that they were at 600,000 tons. So there was certainly a drop in Vietnam's exports by about 15%. A large portion drop came from US, and the second largest portion came from China because China shut down. So we saw somewhere demand rationalization happening in the US because the year before that they ordered too much, fearing lockdowns due to COVID and supply chain issues. So inventories, buyers tells us that they still have inventories of cashew and they're very slow in buying. China has just opened, and we are seeing that China has lesser stocking pipelines and they want to book certain stock. So certainly there is some demand from Chinese side, but whether it is Europe or Middle East, they all have been slow. So the overall view is that unless we see improvement in the kernel prices, the parity is not good right now, and therefore there is not much support for raw material purchase, and people here are expecting that the local prices also come off a little bit. Overall, the crop expectation in Cambodia and Vietnam generally is good to, I would say, from a decent to a good figure, because we've had good distribution of rainfall this year. We did not have sudden heavy rainfalls towards the end. In fact, we had good rainfall just before the flowering, which led to flowering and fruition, and then we have moderate rainfalls now, and the weather is opening also now quite well. So one could expect that the flows would start, say, maybe another 2 to 3 weeks in Vietnam, and Cambodia flows into Vietnam have already started. So in general, we expect market to trade sideways. We do not see a very bearish picture because markets have opened and there is some interest coming in, although not for forward shipment, but for prompt shipments. At the same time, there will be enough supply available. So people are just taking a wait and watch approach in Vietnam at the moment.
That makes perfect sense. Thanks for that. That's a really excellent snapshot analysis of the situation. In the longer term, I don't know if you've been looking at this, but we've noticed that there is some more emphasis on additional processing, roasting, perhaps even consumer packing of cashew kernels in Vietnam. Do you see that as a major trend for the future?
Well, this has happened in the last 2 years, and I would say, medium scale packers have started doing this in-house. They've installed machines to do this. It may not be at par with international standards of roasting and packing yet, because most of these products are going to Middle East. So they have been roasting with the Testa, and Testa included salted cashews, in jars, have been moving to Middle East nations mostly. This is not yet moving to Europe or US in a big way. So there is still time. I think that the industry has to mature, and then they would be able to do that. But we still have to see. So clearly, this trend is there, but it is very limited to a particular segment of the market, not everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, it is a long journey toward some of the standards that supermarkets in the US or in Europe would demand. So it's not surprising that it would develop relatively slowly, I suppose. It looks, the situation, as I see it in Vietnam, crop-wise, demand-wise, I think sometimes we have to kind of suspend belief about 2020 and 21 and look more at 2019. And that makes the current situation look a little bit more normal, shall we say.
Right.
But this price, these low prices of kernels, it surprises me. Let's say the range. There are some very low prices from, as you said earlier, basic HACCP processors compared to some of the larger processors with their BRC or other certifications. Is there any sign of rationalization in that aspect of processing in Vietnam?
Well, the supermarkets are getting tougher and tougher with traders, because traders in general buy from these low-end processors because they offer a very good price. Essentially, they cannot offer credit terms. So the role of a trader becomes important because he will finance the entire transaction. However, on quality, we are seeing that the supermarkets are getting tough on the nut counts, they're getting tough on test are getting tough on peroxide values, etc. So there has become a two-tier processing kind of a thing. As you said, we have prices as low as 2.5 and then prices as high as 2.65 to 2.7. So it's become, what we foresee, it's become a two-tier market. And never I have seen such variation in the cashew markets for the prices. Unfortunately, a domestic market for Vietnam was shut for entire year last year. So domestic market for Vietnam, when I say, is essentially China. So that's what we consider as domestic market for Vietnam. And the Chinese buyers pay higher prices, even higher than what one could fetch within India for domestic prices. So the best part of Vietnamese and Cambodian cashew goes towards China, where you can fetch at least 25 to 30 cents more, the whiter kernels with very low defects and very low brokens, etc. So the quality last year was slightly better because there was no taker for this material, and we were seeing a lot of 180s and 210s and good quality material available for a bargain. This year, I suspect that, as I said, there will become a two-tier market. All the good material will again flow back to China, and then we would have the traditional roasting material available for the other destinations. So it has become a two-tier market, and that is the crux of the whole discussion that I want to bring forth.
Thanks for that, because that's something that many people outside Vietnam or outside China don't actually realize how the market is structured and the importance of the Chinese market to Vietnamese processors. Jaswinder, thanks very much for those contributions. Please stay with us. There are likely to be a few questions if you have the time. But thank you very much.
Here. Thank you. Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you. Okay, let's go to, logically, right beside Vietnam, to Cambodia and speak to Dara An of Ampalagro Products, who has joined us. Dara, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, but can you also hear me back or
yeah,
not?
we can hear you very well, thank you.
Okay, very good, because I am in Singapore now in the hotel, and I try to connect with the Wi-Fi in the hotel, but it doesn't work. So I use my, like my phone spot roaming.
Okay, well, listen, thanks very much for doing that. We really appreciate it. It's great to have you with us. How do you see the situation in terms of cashew production in Cambodia this year?
Yes, first of all, I would like to thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to join this global market encounter. To be honest with you, this year we are thinking that the production will increase because the weather is very favorable for this year. And then, for example, like from September and October, there's less of the plantation was affected by the mosquito tea. So, and now the people, especially most of the farmers, they start harvesting. Harvest the M23 and other variety already. So even the local variety. Now it's something in the middle of the harvest season already for the local variety. The small variety, especially for the farmer that they are doing the organic cashew nut. So production of the nut will be.
Sarah, we're losing you. I think the connection is under pressure.
Hello.
You're back. Okay. You were telling us that you expect
Can you hear
production.
me, or you lost some of my points?
We lost some of your points. We heard that production will be improved this year, and we heard that the weather will be good. And continue, if you would. Okay, unfortunately, his line has dropped again, but we did get.
Maybe I need to turn off
that's
the camera then.
Good idea.
Okay, now you can hear me okay now?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Or not?
We can hear you.
Or you lost some part?
We lost a little. We heard that you were telling us that the weather had been good and that you expect an increase in production. I was wondering, I was wondering, we'd seen the introduction of a new government policy announced on the 13th of January. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
That production this year, the increase 30% here because good condition.
Dara, I'm sorry, the line is breaking up. We just cannot get a stable connection there. I think what we'll do is we'll move on. Maybe Blessing, if you had a moment, you could just contact Dara and tell him that we're moving on, but that if he gets a stable connection, we'd love to hear from him later on again.
Okay.
Thank you. So let's go back to Africa. We've heard from Nigeria, very interesting contribution. And what we'll do is we'll work our way from east to west. So coming to Benin, Josiane Majinga Yabadi of Afro-Cantan. Good morning to you. Thank you for your patience.
Good morning and good morning to everyone. In Benin,
Tell us. Go ahead.
You wanted to ask a question?
I was only going to ask you, how do you see the situation evolving in Benin this year?
Thank you. When we are looking at the Benin area, we witness that the Harmattan is impacting on the crops. A few days back, we had the first rain, which brought a hope to the producers. They were saying that this year the crop will be very good, but for some reasons we go back to Harmattan. And as we are speaking this morning, it's very windy, and we are afraid that we weren't gonna have a good production like last year. That's for the weather. There is this situation of the Harmattan that is continuing in spite of the rain that we had earlier this month. But the producers are continuing to collect the nuts, and we can say that the quality will be good. Although there is this problem of Harmattan, we are expecting to have more cashews than last week. That was the first expectation.
Okay.
There is also the problem of the price. All the stakeholders are having the meetings with the government to try to get a good price than last year, because we need to know that there are many leftover of cashews from last season. And also many processors had difficulties to process the cashew because of the pricing. So this year we hope that all the meetings will bring a solution to bring back all the processors in the activities again. The situation now is like that in Benin. We are on the phase of collection. They are collecting the nuts, and we will wait for the launch, the official launch of the campaign to talk about the quality, because at this stage, we haven't tasted the quality of the nuts.
Okay, and I was in Benin in August, and I visited Afro-Cantan. I see that you are expanding and developing your process. How do you see processing developing in the country? We hear a lot about the new projects in Puerto Novo, and we hear that the processors are talking to the government. It looks like a fairly positive situation. Do you see it that way?
Yes, we hope so, and we see it coming because they've already announced that the exportation will end coming 2024. So the government is trying by all means to promote processing locally.
Which is
So-
really good news. When do you
That is-
expect that the discussions with the government for this year will finish and that we will see the market open?
The market will open in March, like every year. But what we are hoping in those discussions is to come up with an affordable price, because this year the government didn't want to fix the price like the previous year. The government gave the opportunities to other stakeholders to come together and try to fund a price that they will control during the campaign themselves. Because it seemed like when the government give a price, no one is respecting it. So the government wanted to know, to get together all the stakeholders and give them that opportunity to fix themselves the price, which will be convenient for every one to respect. It's a very difficult task because the interests of each stakeholder are at risk here. What the processors are looking at as a commercial price is not what the producers are seeing. And add to that, there are also the traders. So it's a tricky one, but we hope that they will come to an understanding and that will move forward. That's where we stand now. But the campaign will be open officially in March as usual. The
Okay.
only problem is the pricing.
So this needs to be discussed and developed. But it is good to see a process of consultation ongoing in Benin. We are seeing a lot of changes in the cashew sector in the country, and it seems to be developing positively. Josiane Mujinga Yabadi, the sourcing director of Afocantan in Benin, thank you very much indeed. Please stay with us, and hopefully we'll see some questions and we might have a little bit of a chat again later on. Thanks very much for that contribution, and it's great to have you on the GME for the first time.
Thank you.
So let's move to Ghana, and let's have a chat with Forster Boateng of the TCDA, Deputy Director of the TCDA. Forster, you're very welcome. I think this is your first time to join us. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Jim. Actually, my second time.
You were with us before. Okay, your memory is better than mine.
and thank you so much for that quick overview on the world cashew production. That was very informative. Thank you so much. Let me just tee off in my case from the last year quality issues you raised. And I think last year, though the market cleared, we didn't have any old stock. Everything was purchased. And then farmers were able to meet their external contract obligations. However, quality was very low. So this year, TCDA and the Crop Service Directorate pay more attention on sensitizing farmers, aggregators, and traders to improve on the quality. Now this year, the trading opens quite early. And as of January, we realized that quality has improved from last year, which was 46 in terms of KOR, 46 pounds to now 51. And it's quite significant. And we hope to see it go up further. TCDA also, with the support of TCDA helping farmers to come out with a pricing mechanism, has also incentivized farmers to, in a way, improve on their agronomic practices. This year, TCDA and the value chain actors met and they pegged the minimum price, farm gate price, at 8.5 Ghana cedi, which is around $1.02, $1.02. As I speak now, even the market forces has pushed the price to 1.33 at the farm gate. And it's likely it may come down as we move from March to May. It may come down a little bit, but quality has improved very well from January to March trading, as you see now. Now, from statistics we are getting from the field indicates that production may go up by 10 to 12% this year, and it looks very good. Maybe one of the challenges we are facing now is the processing. You know, we are very weak in processing. And with the establishment of the Tree Crop Development Authority, we're trying to improve and promote processing through the regulation that we are going to pass. The regulation has been laid before Parliament, and if it is passed, we put 3 measures in place to incentivize local processing. One, we want processors to be able to do purchases before the official trading is open. And so it gives them advantage to be able to purchase enough raw materials for processing. 2, we are also looking at how we can support processors through other financial instruments to be able to get money to buy and stock and keep inventory of raw materials. And the third one is still under discussion when the regulation is passed. You know, cashew exports, there are no levies or taxes on them. We are trying to raise a little bit of tax on the export of RCN. And then also maybe we'll see how best we'll give some processing subsidies to the processors. If they process and they're able to show evidence of processing, then probably we may waive off the TCDA levies that we charge on the raw cashew. So these are three measures we are putting in place. But as I said, unless the regulation is passed in the coming month, then we'll be able to implement that. So basically, this is a snapshot I can give about Ghana. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much for that. It's really interesting to see that TCDA is now proactive in the cashew sector. I'm interested to hear that your production expected rise 10 to 15%. That's impressive. And that the quality issues are addressed. On the quality issues, is this mostly about post-harvest handling, or was it something to do with weather last year?
Well, weather was an issue and post-harvest handling as well.
So you're developing with other agencies support for farmers in training in post-harvest handling, if I understand it?
Apparently, exactly.
Excellent, okay. And that's the package you've described for processors. Hopefully it's passed. It's quite a supportive package that you have in mind.
Yeah, it is. It's enshrined in the regulation, and we are hoping that the regulation will be passed. Actually, it's gone through the pre-laying stage, and now it's been filed. It's before Parliament. Hopefully, it will be passed by. We've gotten a new minister, so there's a little bit of administrative hiccups there.
Sure.
If the new minister come on stream, we are hoping that he'll be able to follow that by March. And then if the regulation is passed, we'll be able to implement some of the 3 packages we put in place for processors.
Good news, very good news. Ghana is unique though, I mean, in the sense that Ghana is not only becoming a larger and larger producer, but also manages a lot of RCN trade in transit from other countries. That will need, that'll be quite a job of management to figure out what's what, if I may say it like that.
That's correct. That's what the TCDA was set up, and we have to live up to the task to be able to manage that.
I suppose we could also look at that as an opportunity for processors that have raw cashew nuts from other countries also passing through, as well as the indigenous production.
That is correct, but the challenge here is the working capital, and that's what we are trying to work around it. And as part of a support we are getting from World Bank, called under the Ghana Tree Crop Diversification Project, TCDA is going to be funded to the tune of 100 million, and we have allocated almost 35% of the budget to support processors, and in terms of capex and also working capital.
Excellent. I mean, we saw what such a program can do for a sector in Cote d'Ivoire, where we saw tremendous growth following the loan from the World Bank. So that could be a very positive thing for the Ghanaian sector.
Well, we hope so. I mean, I think for me, the tree crop is the way to go to shore up our foreign exchange earnings besides cocoa.
Well,
Because
you certainly will find that I agree with you on that.
yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Foster. I'm going to be, I think, in Ghana at the end of March or in April. I hope we get a chance to meet then and chat again about some of these interesting developments.
Sure, I'm looking forward to that.
Stay with us. Hopefully, we'll see some questions coming as the morning progresses. So
okay, I think I can stay on for about another 10 minutes because I have another engagement coming up at, I thought this was going to be 1 hour, so another engagement coming out in the next 10 minutes. So
sure. Well, look, thanks very much for your time. If I don't get to talk to you again, it's been very much appreciated by the African Cashew Alliance members and all of the participants around the cashew world.
You're welcome. Bye.
So let me come to Cote d'Ivoire. And well, wait a minute. I see Dara back online. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you now because I just need to come to the reception.
Okay, listen, give us, we're running out of time, and we have a couple of people still to come to. Give us a snapshot of how you see things in Cambodia.
Oh. Can you repeat again, Jim?
Just give me a let's say a 1 minute snapshot of how you see the situation in Cambodia in 2023 for the cashew sector.
Okay, thank you very much again. And we are talking about that the production will be increased for this year, including the processing. And now, but we normally have the more about the local processing that they are doing our best. I mean, they doing their best to process in order to meet the international standard. Especially, they are trying to get international food safety certificate, for example, GMP, HACCP, and other high certificate, for example, like organic, in order to penetrate the market in European market. Normally, we get a good news that we have a market in Europe for the organic one, and then we are now in the process to connect with the Chinese market also, especially for the one that we roasted with salt with the testa. So, and even now, like you already asked me the previous time, that the government already issued the cashew policy, and then the ministry that involved in cashew policy, they are trying to provide the incentive to to Cambodia investor for cashew, for example, like they gave the tax free for 3 to 6 years or something like that, and then they try to push the free trade agreement with the Chinese government and Korean government as much as we can in order to expand our market of the canal to those countries. That roughly that we are working very intensively, and hopefully that this year the export for the kernel to international market will increase. Will increase.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And thank you for making the effort to come back and join us. By the way, if you're listening, if you're interested in cashew kernels from Cambodia, talk to Dara, and he is highly knowledgeable, he knows about quality, and ideal person to speak to about the Cambodian cashew sector. Dara, thank you very much indeed. Stay with us if you can for a few minutes, and we'll see if there's some questions. I'm going to move on then to our final speaker, the largest cashew producing country in the world, Cote d'Ivoire, and Mamadou Doumbia, the Director of Commercialization of CCR. Bonjour. Mamadou?
Oui, je vous entends très, très bien, Monsieur Jim. Bonjour.
Good morning. How are you seeing the situation develop for the current year, 2023, in Côte d'Ivoire?
Oui, cette année, il faut dire que nous attendons une bonne récolte parce qu'il faut dire que jusque-là, les conditions météorologiques ont été bonnes pendant les phases végétatives et reproductives du cycle de l'anacardier. Alors, les récoltes ont commencé pratiquement depuis mi-décembre dans nos zones précoces. Elles continuent et les échos qui nous reviennent sont très, très favorables. La production est bonne. Donc, nous attendons une récolte sensiblement supérieure à celle de l'année dernière, où nous avons réalisé un peu plus d'1 million de tonnes. Donc, nous attendons globalement un peu plus d'1 million de tonnes pour cette année. Et les perspectives sont bonnes. Point de vue qualité également, il faut dire que les premières noix que nous collectons sont de bonne qualité. Elles ont des KOR généralement au-dessus de 49. Les noix sont bonnes et déjà, point de vue préparation de la campagne, parce qu'il faut signaler que chez nous, la campagne a été ouverte depuis le 10 février, donc les achats ont commencé déjà dans toutes les zones de production, les achats se déroulent. Donc, nous avons déployé un peu tout nos personnels sur le terrain pour distribuer les sacs d'abord. Donc, tous les producteurs ont pu avoir des sacs pour mieux conserver les noix, pour travailler toujours sur la qualité. Et puis, on continue dans les conseils pour qu'ils puissent préserver cette qualité-là jusqu'au moment où on va enlever. Et de maintenant et jusqu'à, on commence à enlever déjà, février, mars, avril, jusqu'à les noix de mai, juin, puissent quand même garder la bonne qualité. Ça, c'est la première chose. Donc, les perspectives sont bonnes, point de vue récolte. Maintenant, j'ai entendu sur les stocks qu'on parle d'un stock de 85 000 tonnes. Non, on n'a pas de stock de 85 000 tonnes. La campagne s'est terminée, on a un stock résiduel, mais qui est assez faible parce qu'on a compté le stock, on a parlé avec les producteurs et les acheteurs, et le stock qui reste est moins de 10 000 tonnes sur le terrain, dans les zones de production, moins de 10 000 tonnes et moins de 10 000 tonnes aussi en zone portuaire. Ce qui fait qu'aujourd'hui, ancienne production de 2022 en Côte d'Ivoire, c'est moins de 20 000 tonnes. On a moins de 20 000 tonnes qui sont bien répertoriés et on les connaît, qui sont inventoriés. Donc, pour nous, il n'y a pas de risque de mélange avec la nouvelle production. Et la préparation de la campagne est bien avancée. Comme je dis, les prix ont été fixés. La campagne a été ouverte le 10 février. Donc, on a un prix de 315 francs CFA par kilo. On est en évolution de 10 francs CFA par kilo sur l'année dernière. Bon, ça, c'est dû principalement à l'amélioration quand même de la devise du dollar par rapport au CFA, qui nous a permis de maintenir et d'augmenter le prix de 10 francs. Au niveau des changements dans les coûts aussi, il faut dire que pratiquement les prélèvements, il y a une évolution de 12 francs sur les prélèvements en francs CFA. Donc, on passe de 360 francs le kilo à 372 francs CFA le kilo. Donc, voilà ce qu'on peut dire pour notre préparation de campagne. La campagne s'annonce bonne. On a un programme de qualité. On travaille très fortement sur la transformation. Il faut signaler que la transformation, pratiquement l'année dernière, c'est pratiquement un peu plus de 225 000 tonnes qui ont été collectées par nos unités de transformation, soit 22% de notre production. Donc, on a une forte évolution. Donc, il faut noter que de 2014, où on était à 6% pratiquement avec 40 000 tonnes, aujourd'hui, on arrive à collecter près de 225 000 tonnes. Donc, on travaille fortement sur la transformation avec diverses mesures, des mesures sur des subventions, des mesures d'appui aux transformateurs, la mise en place même de nos centres d'innovation et de technologie de l'ANACA. Donc, pour la campagne prochaine, nous attendons encore une évolution de notre taux de transformation. Donc, voilà ce qu'on peut dire sur les perspectives pour la campagne qui a démarré depuis le 10 février.
Well, thank you very much indeed. That's really a concise and interesting contribution. I'm especially interested to hear that the actual inventories are lower, and that's encouraging. I'm impressed that the quality coming in is higher. This is a key thing. And I think everyone should recognize that the the progress in Cote d'Ivoire in recent years, where we now talk about more than 22% of the crop processed in the country, is remarkable. And it gives reason to believe that further development of processing in Africa is possible and likely. Mamadou, thank you very much indeed for that contribution. So we've heard from all our speakers, and I would just like to say to them all, thanks very much indeed. All of your contributions were interesting, informative, and very well presented. Let's hear if we've got some questions from our participants, and let me go to Blessing to see what questions are there for us.
Thank you very much, Jim. We have some questions which are in the Q&A box, which I would read out. The first question is directed to Mr. Ojua Janaku, and it says, is there a farm gate price set by the government? If yes, how much? Good production is expected for 2023. What could be the production estimate for Nigeria?
Thank you, Blessing. For Nigeria, there is no price gate set by government because Nigeria is driven by private sector prices. The buyers decide on what they want to buy. The processor decide on what to buy. But there is no specific price set by the government. It is the market that places pricing. Then about the output, yes, there is going to be lots of output this year, like I said. It's looking very good. We really don't have right statistics, so I won't be able to give you that we are going to produce 300 or 400, because currently we are working with the Bureau of Statistics in Nigeria to have a strategy for us to get the actual production of Nigeria cashew. But it's looking good. The production is going to be very impressive this year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ojo. Jim, would you like to say something before we move to the next question?
I would just say that it's very good when I listen to Ojo and he talks about not guessing at the production statistic, but waiting till he gets the real numbers. I think that's really encouraging. Too many times in the past, we have seen people sort of guess at big numbers. That's not the way to do good market information. So that's a compliment to NCAN for that kind of approach.
Very well. The next question is addressed to you, Jim. The attendee is saying, hello, Jim. Thank you for the presentation. You mentioned the fall in U.S. imports. What are the possible cautions for entering or trying new markets?
Okay, well, it's a good question, of course. I think that the thing is that in times of difficulty, and this is a time of difficulty in the past 3 years, has been, we need to be very careful that we select the right customers. So we need to be careful on contract reliability. We need to be careful that the payment terms are strictly adhered to by buyers. And therefore, it's very important that we select the right customers. I'm a big believer in developing sales and marketing ability, sales and marketing systems in processing companies to avoid these kinds of problems.
Thank you very much.
We have the problem again of the translation coming on the wrong channel.
The technical team is addressing that right away.
Okay. So I think it's important that if I can't address this fully right now, what I would say is the key thing is to select the right customer, do your market research, develop relationships with the customer, look at contract fidelity, in other words, that both parties will do what they say they will do, keep a close eye on the payment terms, and treat sales and marketing as an important activity for the business. It is as important as finance, it's as important as sourcing, it's as important as the process itself. And unfortunately, it's neglected. You cannot assume and should not assume that because a buyer is located in the United States or in Europe or in the Middle East, that they are necessarily the right buyer for your business. And it's far too often the case that we see new processors, fresh to export, developing and just being unfortunate enough to pick the wrong customers. So look for the right kind of relationships. And it's a great question, but it's not one that we can really say too much about today. I could probably talk to you about that for 2 days. But thanks for the question. I hope that answer helps. Blessing.
Thank you very much, Jim. Perhaps we could just ask the questions that were addressed to Mr. Boateng as he has to leave us. Mr. Boateng, if you are still with us, there are 2 questions addressed to you, and I'll read both so that you can probably give us your answers or comments on them before you leave. The first one says, what is the most recent record on cashew production for Ghana? Maybe 2022. And the second one, are there any regulations around transit trade in Ghana?
I didn't get the last question.
Are there any regulations around transit trade in Ghana?
Transit trade in Ghana.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Talking about production, I think we have the 2021-2022 figure. It's around 200,000 metric tons. And this year, the projections that the Crop Service Directorate did indicates that we may be hitting about 225 or 225,000 metric tons. So if I don't know if that's the kind of questions answers is requesting for, the data is available at Ministry of Food and Agriculture, Crop Service Directorate. So in terms of the production figures. Now we have a regulation now before Parliament. And within the regulation, we have made provisions for trading, transiting, all those things in the regulation. Until it is passed, I'm unable to discuss the details of the regulation. But I think whoever asks that question must be a bit patient, and I'm sure by March or April, the regulation will be out, and we will socialize people on the content of the regulation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Boateng. Jim, any comments?
No, just thanks to Foster for his time and contribution.
Thank you very much, Mr. Foster Boateng, for joining us, and we understand that you have to leave. Thank you. Do you have any final words before even?
No, what I'll say is, Jim, thank you for inviting me and Blessing. And I'll say kudos to my other panelists. I've learned a lot from other countries, especially what's happening in, Cote d'Ivoire has always been our shining example that we've been following. We know it's the market lead. And Nigeria is doing some fantastic job. We want to learn something from Nigeria as I see production going up. And then Benin, being an emerging market for processing, I think we need to talk to Benin a lot and learn from them. So Jim, share your presentation with us. And I'm looking forward to see you in Ghana in March, April.
I look forward to that too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So the next question is addressed to Madame Josiane Yabadi from Africantown, Benin. It says, the government had decided to stop getting involved in price fixing, which leaves the markets free. Why is he still arguing with the actors on the issue? Madame Josiane, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm still with you. The question is, the government
had decided to stop getting involved in price fixing, which leaves the market free. Why is he still arguing with the actors on this issue?
The issue is not coming from the government. The issue is among the stakeholders. There are controversies about understanding each other because the interests are different. The price that allows the processors to go forward is not the price that the producer wants to sell his product. Same goes for the traders who want a profit on the products they are trading. That's the problem. The government is working here as a facilitator to get them together to try to to get one price that will allow to commercialize this year. That is not the one who's leading the issue. It's among themselves that they are not understanding each other. The processors are trying to go as low as possible to allow them at least to get a even breaking. But that is not how the producers are perceiving the matter.
Thank you very much, Madam Josiane. The next question, maybe before we go to the next question, Jim, do you want to add any comments to what she just said?
No, Josiane has explained that very well. Thank you.
Okay, we have a follow-up question actually for Mr. Boatin, but he's unfortunately not anymore with us. He had to go to another meeting. So we move to the next question from Burkina Faso, directed to Mr. Doumbia. What is the current farmer gate price in Ivory Coast? What is the 2023 tax on the export of RCN? Monsieur Doumbia. Hello, Mr.
Alors,
Yes.
donc je vous reçois parfaitement. Le prix actuel en Côte d'Ivoire, le prix a été fixé. Il est de 315 francs CFA par kilo. Ça, c'est le prix Borchamp. Donc, c'est un prix plancher obligatoire. C'est un prix en dessous duquel aucun achat ne peut se faire. Donc, c'est un prix qui est obtenu à l'issue de discussions avec les acteurs. Il faut signaler que l'interprofession, l'organisation interprofessionnelle agricole de l'ANACAD a été mise en place. Donc, cette année, on a discuté avec l'organisation interprofessionnelle agricole. Donc, on s'est mis d'accord sur les paramètres. Et ces paramètres-là en Côte d'Ivoire, c'est notamment le prix CAF de référence, qui est souvent pris sur l'Inde ou le Vietnam, le prix CAF de référence. Le taux de change du dollar, il faut le traduire en francs CFA. Et puis, les charges. Voilà. Donc, on s'est entendu sur ces différents éléments-là et le prix a été fixé à 315 francs CFA par kilo. Et la campagne a été lancée le 10 février. Voilà. Et les achats sont en cours.
Thank you very much, Monsieur Doumbia.
Donc, nos perspectives, c'est de collecter nos plus de 1 million de tonnes. Voilà. Et puis, en matière d'objectifs de transformation, aller un peu jusqu'à 300 000 tonnes, c'est notre objectif. Et puis, exporter le reste, principalement vers l'Inde et le Vietnam. Donc, voilà un peu nos perspectives. Bon, et voilà.
Thank you very much, Monsieur Doumbia. I hope that answers the question. Jim, just before we end the session, what should we be looking out for in the next GME?
Well, in the next GME, we're going to update all of those situations that we've been talking about with regards to production. But when we look at the situation now, we're looking at a relatively positive outlook for production in 2023, but there are a lot of question marks around demand. And therefore, there are a lot of question marks for processors. So in the next GME, which is on the 8th of March, we're going to take a look at kernels markets, how they behave, and we're going to talk to some processors, new African processors, and get the perspective on what's it like to start a processing business in Africa, how that develops, and how to access markets. That'll be on March 8th.
Thank you very much, Jim, and your closing remarks in the absence of any other question.
Well, I'd just like to say thank you very much. We've done something today that is unusual for GME. We've had more presenters on than ever. I want to thank all of them, all the way across from Jasvinder in Vietnam, Andara, Tukaram Prabhu, from Nigeria, Ojo Ajanaku, from Cote d'Ivoire, Mamadou Doumbia, Josiane Mujinga Yabadi from Benin, and from Ghana, Forster Boateng. Between them, they've given us a really good perspective on what to expect for this year. Their expertise is really terrific to listen to. So thank you all very much indeed. I do appreciate you're all very busy, and your valuable time given to this forum is so much appreciated. Thanks very much also to our interpreters, technical staff, and to you, Blessing. And of course, to all our participants, people who've asked questions and who've listened to us. And you can access the presentations and the video online on the ACA media channels. Thanks very much indeed from me.
Thank you very
Thanks.
much, Jim.
Thank you,
Thank you very
Jim.
much, Jim, for the delivery of another presentation. And we also appreciate our guests that joined us from 7 countries today. To our participants, we are grateful that you join us every fortnight. The next session of the ACA Global Market Encounter with Jim Fitzpatrick will take place on the 8th of March. I repeat, the next session of the ACA Global Market Encounter will take place on the 8th of March. Until then, we ask that you stay safe. Bye-bye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.